You know, some cities are just dots on a map, places you might visit. But then there are a very select few, that are more like characters in our collective story. And I don't think any city has a life story that's more dramatic, more violent, or more world-changing than Jerusalem. So for this explainer, that's exactly how we're going to treat it, as a biography.
And this quote, man, it just nails it. Because Jerusalem has never just been a physical place with stone walls and ancient streets. It's always been an idea, a prophecy, a dream. A celestial city that has captured the imagination of billions, shaping history from thousands of miles away just as much as it has from right there on the ground.
So, a biography of a city. That's the plan. We're going to walk through its moments of incredible glory, its absolute darkest tragedies, and we're going to zero in on one single pivotal event, a moment that really represents both its death and its unbelievable world-changing rebirth. Just look at the sheer weight of these titles. I mean, you have to ask yourself, how? How did this one small, kind of remote town become the absolute center of the universe for 3 global religions? It became the ultimate prize, a place so holy that entire empires would literally rise and fall just for the chance to control it.
Okay, so to really understand Jerusalem's story, we have to zoom in on one critical moment. We're going to travel back in time to the 1st century, to the year 70 CE. The city is at the absolute peak of its power and glory, but it's also standing on the edge of a cliff.
And this slide right here shows you the fundamental tension, the core problem. On one side, you have the heart of the entire Jewish world, its spiritual and political capital. But on the other side, you have the brutal reality of the Roman Empire. To them, Jerusalem was just another province to be taxed and controlled, and a particularly rebellious one at that. This whole situation was a powder keg, and it was just waiting for a spark.
And don't picture some small, dusty town. At this point in history, Jerusalem was a sprawling metropolis. We're talking 450 acres. That's nearly double the size of the old city that you can go and visit today. It was a thriving, world-famous city packed to the gills with people, residents, refugees, and pilgrims from all across the known world.
And at its very center, the jewel in the crown, stood the Second Temple. King Herod had renovated it into one of the true wonders of the ancient world. But it wasn't just a place to pray. Oh no, it was the Supreme Court, it was the National Bank, it was the symbol of Jewish identity all rolled into one magnificent structure. The fate of the temple and the fate of Jerusalem, they were one and the same.
But here's where the story takes a just gut-wrenching turn. The most tragic part is that before a single Roman soldier even arrived at the gates, Jerusalem began to tear itself apart. The Great Revolt against the Roman Empire just collapsed into a vicious civil war, a war against itself. Now check this out. Rome itself was in chaos. The Emperor Nero was dead, and the empire was consumed by its own civil war. Now this should have been a golden opportunity for the rebels in Jerusalem to unite, to prepare. But instead of using that precious time to get ready for the Roman counterattack, they used it to turn their swords on each other. The city literally fractured into 3 warring armies. You had John of Gischala and Eleazar ben Simon, who were leading these rival zealot factions, fighting each other for control of the temple itself. Meanwhile, Simon bar Jora's huge peasant army controlled most of the rest of the city. And the crazy thing is, they hated each other as much, if not more, than they hated the Romans. And this is maybe the single most devastating fact of the entire story. In their bitter, pointless infighting, these factions set fire to the city's granaries. They destroyed the food supplies that could have sustained the entire population for years. It was an act of pure, suicidal fanaticism. They basically sealed their own fate. So by the time the new Roman Emperor Vespasian sent his son, Titus, to finish the job, well, Jerusalem was already a city weakened by starvation and self-inflicted wounds. The final, horrific act of this tragedy was about to begin. Just look at the sheer force Titus brought to the city gates. I mean, as you can see here, he had 4 full legions. That's about 24,000 of the best soldiers in the world. But then, he also had an equal number of support troops and allies. His total force was nearly 50,000 men. This wasn't a battle. This was an overwhelming war machine facing a city that had already bled itself dry. Faced with a common enemy, the Jewish factions, they finally united. And they fought with unbelievable ferocity. But it was just too late. The Romans were masters of siege warfare, and they relentlessly breached wall after wall after wall. Then, on a day of mourning that's still observed, the daily sacrifice in the temple stopped for the first time in centuries. The end was here.
Titus ordered the city's total and complete destruction. What wasn't burned to the ground was torn down stone by stone. The eyewitness historian Josephus wrote that the devastation was so absolute you wouldn't even know a city had ever been there. And you know what? Archaeology backs this up. You can still go to the base of the Temple Mount today and see the massive, toppled stones that Roman soldiers pushed over 2,000 years ago.
But here's why all of this matters so much. The fall of Jerusalem wasn't just an ending. In a way, it was a violent birth. The destruction of that city and its temple would fundamentally reshape two of the world's great religions, forever.
For Judaism, this catastrophe forced one of the most remarkable transformations in religious history. With no temple for sacrifice, the religion had to evolve, or it would die. So it became a faith centered not on a physical place, but on a text, the Torah, and on actions. The rabbis taught that prayer and simple acts of loving kindness were a new kind of atonement. This is the birth of Rabbinic Judaism, the Judaism that has endured for millennia.
And what's so incredible is that in their own soul-searching, the Jewish sages didn't just blame Rome. The Talmud offers this profound piece of self-critique. The temple was lost not because of Roman might, but because of wanton hatred. That baseless internal hatred that led them to burn their own food and kill their own brothers. So what happened next? The Romans rebuilt Jerusalem as a pagan city and banned Jews from even entering it. This whole event also drove a huge wedge between the still young Christian movement and its Jewish roots. And a single remaining retaining wall of the temple platform, the Western Wall, transformed from just a piece of architecture into the most sacred site in all of Judaism, a place of deep mourning, but also of profound hope.
So you see, the biography of Jerusalem is this constant, incredible cycle of ruin and renewal. It was completely destroyed in 70 CE, but from its ashes, new worlds were born. And that leaves all of us with a question that echoes from those ancient stones right into our own time. What will its next chapter be?